Okay, so welcome to this next video in the playlist on the heart. In this video, what we're going to talk about is the effect of sympathetic stimulation on the heart. Okay, so we're talking about the SNS, the sympathetic nervous system, and the heart. But really, we're talking about the heart. We're not going to look into the sympathetic nervous system in that much detail. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the sympathetic nervous system, and then we're going to see what the effect of sympathetic stimulation on the heart actually is, how it triggers changes in the heart. So that's the format for this video. We're going to have initially a discussion of the sympathetic nervous system and what it's going to do to the heart on a macroscopic level. We're then going to look at how it is actually going to achieve these two things. Okay, right. So, the sympathetic nervous system then. The sympathetic nervous system is a series of neurons which become active in the fight or flight response. So when you are in a situation which requires a fight or flight response, so when you're in danger basically, when you're stressed, you activate the sympathetic nervous system, and what it does is it gets you ready to either fight or run. Okay, so what effects do you think the sympathetic nervous system is going to have on the heart? What are we going to need if we're going to fight or run? Well, if we're going to fight or run, we're going to be using our skeletal muscle more, so we're going to need a greater delivery of nutrients to the skeletal muscle, which means we're going to need a greater cardiac output. The heart is going to need to pump more blood through it in a certain amount of time. So the amount of blood that the heart pumps through it in a minute is known as the cardiac output, and is often denoted just as CO. So CO stands for cardiac output, and this is how output, and this is how much blood the heart pumps through it in a minute. So if we collected all the blood that the heart pumps through it, in a minute, that would be the cardiac output. And at rest, it's usually around approximately 5 litres per minute. So 5 litres per minute is the usual at-rest cardiac output. Okay, so what is the cardiac output? How would we work the cardiac output out? Well, if we wanted to work out what cardiac output actually is, what we'd do is we'd take the heart rate, which is how many times the heart beats in a minute, which is approximately 70 times per minute, so it's approximately 70 beats per minute, and we multiply that by how much blood is pumped out of the heart for each beat, which is known as the stroke volume. So heart rate is what I mean by HR, so HR stands for heart rate, okay, and SV here stands for stroke volume. Okay, so if I want to increase my cardiac output, if I want to increase the amount of blood my heart is pumping from the venous to the arterial side in a minute, then I can either increase the heart rate, i.e. I can increase the number of times my heart beats in a minute, or I can increase the amount that it ejects for every single beat, the so-called stroke volume. Okay, so the stroke volume, just to reaffirm it, is how much blood is ejected upon every single beat. So this formula should be plainly obvious. It is stating the obvious. Okay, so it's saying how many times do you beat in a second, how much blood do you eject for each beat, multiply them together, and you'll get how much blood is ejected in a minute. Okay, right. So heart rate, by the way, is how many times the heart beats per minute. I think I might have said second a moment ago. Right. Okay, so in response to sympathetic nervous stimulation, we are going to increase both of these. We are going to increase the amount of times the heart beats in a minute, i.e. we're going to increase the heart rate, and we're also going to increase the amount that it ejects with each beat, i.e. we're going to increase the stroke volume. So we're going to increase both of these. Now, when you increase the heart rate, in order to increase the heart rate, you have to act on the sinoatrial node. So to increase the heart rate, you have to act on the sinoatrial node, or the SA node. Because the SA node, remember, is the portion of the heart which actually controls the heartbeat. So you need to do something to the sinoatrial node that means that the number of spontaneous action potentials it fires per minute is increased. So the sympathetic nervous system is going to act on the sinoatrial node to increase its rate of firing so that the heart beats more times in a minute and the heart rate goes up. Okay, and when you increase the heart rate, there's a fancy word to describe that. You're said to have a positive chronotropic effect. So positive chronotropic effect. So chronotropy refers to how fast the heart is beating. So if you have a positive chronotropic effect, then it means that you are increasing the heart rate in some way. So the sympathetic nervous stimulation of the heart is going to have a positive chronotropic effect via acting on the sinoatrial node. Okay, so that's the first way in which it's going to increase cardiac output, by increasing the amount of times the heart beats in a minute via acting on the sinoatrial node. The second way it's going to increase cardiac output is via increasing stroke volume. Now, how do you increase the amount of blood that you eject with each beat? Well, to do that, what you're going to have to do is make the heart beat more powerfully. So when the heart, you're going to have to make the heart contract more powerfully. So when the heart contracts, let's take, for example, the left ventricle as an example. When the left ventricle contracts, does it squeeze every last drop of blood out of it? Absolutely not. Of course it doesn't. It doesn't squeeze right down to the point where there's nothing left inside. It just contracts it contracts quite a bit, ejects a certain fraction of the volume of the blood that was actually in it initially, and pumps that into the aorta. Okay, well, that's how we can increase our stroke volume. Make it contract harder, make it pump a greater fraction of the blood that is sitting within it out every time that it beats, basically. So we can increase the stroke volume by increasing the force with which the myocardial cells contract. So to increase the heart rate, the sympathetic nervous system only needs to work on the sinoatrial node. To increase the stroke volume, it needs to work on every single cardiomyocyte in the heart. Okay, so it's going to increase the force with which the cardiac muscle cells contract, and when you do that, there is again a fancy word for that, and you are said to have a positive inotropic effect. Okay, so inotropy refers to how hard the heart beats, the force with which each cardiomyocyte contracts. So if you have a positive inotropic effect, it means that you make the cardiomyocytes contract with a greater force, so that they're going to now eject more blood from the chamber into whichever blood vessel it's ejecting the blood into. Okay, right, so that's the way in which the sympathetic nervous system is going to increase the cardiac output, by increasing the heart rate, so increasing the number of beats we have per minute, and also by increasing the actual amount of blood we eject every time we beat, by increasing the force with which we contract, i.e. we're going to have positive inotropic effects and also positive chronotropic effects. Now, we're going to tackle both of these, and we're going to take on the bigger one first, which is positive inotropic effects. We're going to take on positive inotropic effect first, and then we'll talk about positive chronotropic effect later. Now, before we actually begin talking about the positive inotropic effect, what I want to do is discuss with you a little bit more about the sympathetic nervous system. So, where do the nerves which are coming onto the heart to release the neurotransmitter that they're going to release to cause this positive inotropic and positive chronotropic effect. Where do they come from? Well, they come from the spinal cord. So, if we have a cross-section of the spinal cord here. So here's the spinal cord. Okay. So, whoops, this is the front of the spinal cord. It's the so-called ventral portion. It's a little bit uneven, I admit, but never mind. This is the ventral portion. This is the dorsal portion. So dorsal means back, ventral means front. Okay, so this is the bit towards your belly button. This is the bit towards towards your back. Okay, right. So in the spinal cord, you have grey matter and white matter. Now, the grey matter is where the cell bodies of the neurons are. The white matter is where the axons of the neurons are. So, what's the grey matter is in a certain sort of pattern in the spinal cord, so I'll show it here. And by the way, we are looking at a thoracic section of the spinal cord at the moment. Okay, so a region that's nearby where the thorax is, so near the ribs. Okay, at that sort of level. So, you have this sort of shape of grey matter here. Okay, so this is all grey matter, and then the surrounding tissue is all white matter. So this is the cell bodies of neurons, and this is the axons of neurons. Right. Okay, so it's kind of in the shape of a butterfly almost, except that it's got this little protuberance here. Now, these backwards projections here, these are known as the dorsal horns. So this is the dorsal horn. This forward projection here, this is known as the ventral horn. Okay, ventral horn of the spinal cord. And here, this is the intermediate horn. And this intermediate horn is something that you only really see in the thoracic regions of the spinal cord. You don't see it in the cervical or lumbar or sacral regions. Okay, now, the neurons that are the sympathetic nervous system, they come out from this intermediate horn. They have their cell bodies in the intermediate horn. So here's the cell body of our sympathetic neuron, and it's going to send out its axon like so. Okay? And then what's going to happen is this is not the neuron which will actually synapse onto the heart. Instead, this is what's known as the preganglionic sympathetic neuron. So this is the preganglionic neuron. Okay? And basically it will synapse in a sympathetic ganglion. So I have a sympathetic ganglion here, where it synapses onto another cell, the so-called postganglionic cell. So this is the postganglionic sympathetic neuron. Postganglionic neuron, and this is the neuron which will actually synapse onto the heart. So the preganglionic neuron is the one with its cell body in the intermediate horn of the thoracic region of the spinal cord. It sends its axon out peripherally, and then it will synapse in a peripheral sympathetic ganglion. Okay, so this is a sympathetic ganglion. Again, the sympathetic ganglia all lie generally in a chain. There are a few exceptions where they're not in the chain, but they generally lie in these two sort of chains which run parallel with the vertebral column. Then you have two, one on either side. So this is a sympathetic ganglion. Okay, and just a little bit of fact. The neurotransmitter that transmits the signal from the preganglionic neuron to the postganglionic neuron is acetylcholine. Okay, and the receptors on the postganglionic neuron for acetylcholine are nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, similar to those on muscle cells, basically. Not the same type as the ones on muscle cells, but similar structure. They're at least ligand-gated ion channels rather than G protein-coupled receptors. Okay, and the postganglionic neuron releases noradrenaline. Okay, so it's noradrenaline that we are going to get released onto our cardiac muscle cell, basically, and it's noradrenaline that is going to cause this positive chronotropic effect by acting on the sinoatrial node, and this positive inotropic effect by acting on every single cardiomyocyte in the heart. Okay, and we'll continue this discussion in the next video.